Good morning, beautiful people. It's Christina Melanie from Collaborative Growth Coaching, and we have a special event today, so clearly we're live. Yay! So please send in your questions to our panel this morning. And with us, we have some amazing folks talking about end of life, which is something that's near and dear to my personal heart with the grief coaching and the end of life doula. So let me introduce our panel to you this morning. Of course, you know the lovely Melanie Oliveri, who's going to be our moderator this morning. We have Gina DePrima, who is serving as our attorney this morning, asking and answering all your legal questions. We have Dr. Robert Zielinski, who is an oncologist. We have Carrie Ybarra, who is a registered nurse and an end-of-life doula. And we have Marika McMeans, who is the most cool funeral director I've ever met in my life. So,
Can you be a cool funeral director?
I think
I try.
She is. She's very cool. And she knows so much stuff, and you can find all the craziness. She actually told me where I could go in this country to get a funeral pyre done. So I'm all about it. So what I want you guys to do this morning is just kind of picture this panel as a circle. And that circle is surrounding a few of the universal experiences that we all do as humans, but we always seem to tiptoe around them. No one ever wants to talk about end of life. And we would like to share that with you and follow each one of them like they're holding a lantern down a different path and see what kind of things it sparks in you. And if you need to talk to us at any point outside of this podcast, please feel free to reach out, and you know you can do that. And we'll have everybody's information at the end of the podcast as well. So, that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie.
Good morning, gang. Welcome to our live. Thank you all very much for being here today. And I'm going to start with just a general question to each one of you. What drew you into your field of work? And why so directly, beyond Marika, why so directly with death?
Starting with me?
Starting with you.
Well, I've spent over 20 years helping families navigate the court system, and long story short, court is not a place where families should be, ever. Even when they believe it's a situation where people are going to agree and everyone's going to get along, it doesn't typically end that way once you start going through court. And I started to realize how many families actually end up there going through that process in court, or just having family conflict and broken relationships and things like that when it comes to death, because it is such an emotional time. And when people are grieving, they're less likely to be thinking in their rational, logical mind. So for me, I was really drawn to this because it's part of my purpose to help families keep the peace, stay at peace, avoid conflict, avoid court, and through proper planning in the beginning before a death, that's where I believe I can be of the greatest service. Because with proper planning, that's how people can grieve, but grieve in a healthier way and move forward a little easier when they're not having to deal with judges and attorneys and unnecessary fees and meetings and expenses and things of that nature. So
Everything's more clear.
when you have a nice, clear path to follow, like a map, I call it a road map, yes, that does an immense amount for the family left grieving.
Thank you very much. Bob?
Well, in medical oncology, it's especially, but it's in medicine in general, I think people too much, doctors too much, feel like their job is to fix everything. And that death is a failure in that sense, because our job is to keep people alive. And it's not really true. It's particularly untrue in medical oncology because so many things we know going in are not curable disease. And I think one of the great failings of the profession sometimes is the inability to recognize that success is not always the same thing as survival. And I'm not sure exactly how I landed in medical oncology as I go back and think about it, but I know, and I knew early on that I landed in the right place. because I think, and I don't think 30 years of doing it have changed the perspective that I'm not sure everybody does that very well in terms of preparing people and having the honest discussions about it. So I'm happy to be here participating in something like this just to further the cause, because I think it's a great failure of American medicine that this is not more front and center.
Thank you.
Okay, it's my turn. So I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for 11 years, and I found myself, when I was taking care of patients, I've worked in a variety of settings, floors in the hospital, taking care of patients who are terminal or are dying. There's a huge elephant in the room a lot of times, from family members who don't want to say anything, the doctor, like it's just, so I found myself wanting to, I guess like what Bob said, kind of make it more of a central point, and also try and help the people who are dying, because a lot of times they're scared and they have a lot of anxiety, and so just trying to support them in the best way that I can at the end of life is what I found I really enjoy doing. So, yeah.
So I knew what I wanted to do fairly young. I started working in a funeral home when I was 15, before they'd even pay me, just showing up every day after school and being there to help in any way that they'd let me. I walked in my first day volunteering at the funeral home and just knew that this is why I exist. I loved how the community respected and adored the funeral director. I loved how much he helped the community and was such an integral part in taking care of everyone. And I just really knew that that's what I wanted to do. I liked the balance of science and artistry with the embalming and the actual care of the deceased. And I really appreciated the ability to be there for the families and actually be a part of my community and help with the arrangements and the funeral planning. Every day is interesting, no day is boring, which I also appreciate. And yeah, it's very important to me to be there, just to witness humanity and be a part of that journey.
Christine,
Thanks.
you?
So for me, it's, you know, like Carrie, I've been a nurse for over 40 years. That's a scary thought. But, you know, getting into being with patients, and, you know, there's always that one triggering moment where you say, I really think I need to do something down this road, this particular path in life. And it was really a particular patient that I had in the hospital. And there was nothing you could do for this individual, but no one ever came to see him. No one, you know, participated in anything that was happening to him except for us. And that really struck a chord with me. And like, people need people. People need someone to be there, even if it's just to hold your hand, to do whatever. And for me, it was a very telling moment. But what I found that really my love is the grief work. And I know that sounds weird, I love grief. But people need someone who's going to listen, someone who's going to understand. And I may not be able to fully understand what you're going through as an individual, because clearly we're all different, and your situations are going to be different. But it is something that follows you through your life, and you lose someone close to you, your entire life, you recognize that.
Yeah.
Whether it's intensity of the loss in the beginning, whether it's those moments where you're standing in the shower and you're like, oh my God, I so miss so-and-so, and you're, you know, the whole bit. And it happens, and people, our society treats grief like it should be, okay, look, you know, your mother died, and you should, exactly, are you done? Are you done yet? You know, your mother died last week, Tuesday, why are you not moving forward?
Yeah.
Why are you not, why is this not over? And what people don't understand is it's never over.
Right.
It doesn't end. It changes, it morphs, it goes up, it goes down, and it's a roller coaster. It's not a straight line. And that's where I feel the best, working with people so that they can understand that and live their life
I want them to have a great life, aside from their grief. And yeah, that roller coaster goes on for the rest of your life. It might not be as strong, but it's definitely there. Bob, what do patients and families misunderstand about what modern medicine can and can't do at the end of life?
Well, first, one of the biggest reasons, and really a common denominator underlying every lousy outcome where you've got a bunch of people in a hospital without conversation and no one really knows what to do next. And the thing that underlies that is the natural human tendency for denial. We can all sort of understand, okay, these things happen and people die of cancer and it's over here, but that's not me or that's not my family. When it obviously is. But that capacity to deny the obvious no longer ceases to amaze me. It's always fascinating, it's always incredible, but it no longer surprises me. And it starts there, and the failure of the profession, as I said before, is that we often don't help break that down. It's a process, it takes a while. You can't just throw it at people at the last minute, which is how they wind up in hospital beds and ICUs in these hopeless, terrible situations. So what folks misunderstand sometimes is where the limitations of medicine are, and I think unfortunately sometimes the profession lets them, because it's easier to come up with the next treatment or come up with the next intervention than it is to have this uncomfortable conversation.
Say there isn't the next.
Yeah.
Marika, that first 24 or 48 hours after a loved one has passed away, what don't the families realize in that time period?
I think because nobody ever has any of these conversations, right? I don't think they realize anything really of what happens next. I get a lot of phone calls of, Mom just died, what do I do? I've never done this before, which is fair. It's not their job to know this process, but I truly think there's very much a lack of understanding. I know that oftentimes, like if somebody passes away in the hospital, somebody with good intentions says, which funeral home are we going to use? We'll give them a call, and then a week goes by, and somebody calls me and says, so did you already cremate Mom? I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even, first of all, you didn't come in to give me permission to cremate Mom,
right.
But also I didn't know Mom died. Because oftentimes the hospital, there's a miscommunication between the staff on the floor, the administration that actually calls me, the morgue, and everything else in between that. So there's always, or oftentimes, a break in communication there, which can start off already challenging. The other piece is dependent on where somebody passes away, there are different steps. So if somebody passes in a hospital, it's the family's responsibility to call them, let me know that they've passed, and then start that process. And I don't typically go to the hospital immediately to bring somebody from the room to the funeral home. There's usually a time delay there. If somebody passes away at a nursing home, there's more time. The family is permitted to go and spend some time with their person in the room, and then they'll call me, or the nursing facility will call me when they're ready, and I come out, whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. The other piece is when somebody dies at home, and I think this is everyone's goal, right? Nobody wants to be in a facility when they die, but it also adds some extra challenges potentially to the family. So if they are under hospice care, things tend to go a little bit more smoothly because the hospice nurse is there to pronounce, or a funeral director can pronounce in that case, and I'm able to go whenever the family wants to bring that person into our care. If they are not under hospice care, they have to call 911, and everybody comes out. The ambulance comes, the medical examiner comes, and that process is way elongated. If it's suspicious, that person would go back to the medical examiner or the coroner. If it's not suspicious and it was a natural death, it just was unattended, then the funeral director is allowed to come. But there's a huge amount of time in between when they actually pass and when I get there. And I think all of those things can be certainly stressful and not known. But I would also say, most importantly, something that I would tell everybody is that death is not a rush. So while it may feel that somebody has died and I must immediately remedy the situation or do something about it, there's time. Whether or not it's at a facility or at home, you don't have to call anybody right away. You can take your time and spend it with the person, whether it's 10 minutes or several hours. It's not my prerogative on when I end that experience. So I think taking time and really being in the moment is an acceptable thing to know.
And I think that's something that's really good for people to know.
I think so too, yeah.
You know, I think you have to start the grieving somewhere, so why not start it with that family member, that person?
Yeah, not everybody's comfortable with having their person, dead in home, but I think there is a piece to that that is important. It's important to create some ceremony and sanctuary in that space.
Gina, we all know the legal system gets in the middle of it if they have to. So what are the most important legal documents that every adult should have before a medical crisis occurs?
So every adult, and I'm going to define this as anybody 18 years of age and older, and I know that might even surprise people because you might think when 18-year-old, I hear this all the time. I don't have anything, I don't own anything, what do I need to think about this for? Even some older people. And planning really isn't about that. It's not about how much you own. It's not about what you have. It's not about how many, if you have kids or not. It's really more about do you own anything or have anybody that you love that you're going to leave behind? And I think that we all do. So the most important document starting at age 18, I would say, is a power of attorney. That is a legal document where you can authorize another person, 18 years old or older, to manage basically your life, everything except for medical decisions. So accessing your bank accounts, things of that nature. If there's a crisis, if you become incapacitated, meaning you're so badly injured or in a medical condition that you can't make your own decisions. So a power of attorney is a legal document whereby you get to pick and designate the person who's going to be able to make those decisions for you if you can't and manage your affairs, so to speak. Second to that, and this really isn't ranked in any order, but a healthcare proxy. So a healthcare proxy is your legal document where you are going to name somebody to make those important medical decisions for you if you are in an incapacitated state and you can't make those medical decisions. And again, I state this for even 18-year-olds because it is not an automatic that parents would be able to just swoop in and make those decisions for their child once they're 18. So it's very important to have a healthcare proxy set up. I would always recommend, in addition to that, a living will, which helps to round that out and provide some instructions to your agent that you're naming to make those medical decisions. In a living will, you can put in writing what kinds of decisions you would want made. And of course, to always have that conversation so the person isn't just armed with the ability to make a decision, but they know what you would have wanted them to decide. Which is so important. I can't understate it because so many people, when they get to those final moments and they're told that mom or dad or best friend, that the situation looks bleak, that they're in a terminal condition or an irreversible condition, and what should we do? And that person needs to make a decision. And knowing what that person would have wanted can just alleviate, so much guilt that people have on the other side when they're just unsure of what would happen. And it can alleviate disputes between family members who think they may know or what they'd want to do, and then there's that disagreement. So a living will I would recommend in addition to that. And at some point I've started to really recommend that my clients consult with their doctor and complete, and sometimes you need to make an appointment to do this, but to complete a MOLST form. Medical, I'm sure a doctor would know the exact acronym and what that stands for. I don't want to botch it, but I know it's a hot pink form, and it should be completed with the help of a doctor. And I know that, in an emergency situation, at least this is what I've learned, is that the medical professionals and the team in the ER, that they're going to be looking for this hot pink form. And even though legally we can create this healthcare proxy and a living will, and yes, that has a legal effect, the most form has an even greater legal effect, and it's in a lot more detail, and that's why it should be discussed with a medical professional, your doctor, to help you understand the nature and consequences of the decisions that you are now designating a person to make for you and what those decisions are. So I'd say that those are the most important documents. After that, if you want to have a will to at least designate a person who's going to manage everything through the court process, then that could be helpful. But also oftentimes the default law will take care of that for you. So that's why I don't rank that as number one, because really a will is more or less your letter to the court where you're saying, I want this person to do it. So you'd have that benefit. But I'd say those are the most important.
Okay, we'll get back to you in a second.
I have a question, since we're talking to Gina. What is the difference between the will and the different kinds of trust, and which one do you think is better, or should people have both?
Wow, well, the difference between a will and a trust. First, let me say this. There are many, many, many different types of trusts. And I think from a starting position, it should be looked at it, is it a revocable living trust or is it an irrevocable trust? And a lot of times what people are talking about when they ask a question like this is they're referring to a revocable living trust. A revocable living trust is a way in which you can avoid the court process for your family. You can allow your family to grieve and to handle everything that needs to be taken care of legally, but they can do so at their own pace, in privacy, working with an attorney in an office. It's not public, and it saves you the hassle, the inconvenience, the extra expense of going through court, and allows you as the person to leave more specific guidance behind in terms of not just who do you want to receive your property, but how do you want them to receive it, which is another question. So that's a revocable living trust. It's really hard to say what I would recommend, a will versus a trust, because this conversation goes a lot deeper, and I think it depends on each individual person and their family dynamic and what's important to them. If somebody's goal is to make things as easy as possible for their loved ones once they pass, and to provide more of that clear roadmap and a light forward and clarity, then in general, yes, a revocable living trust. I would always recommend that over a will, because like I said, a will is nothing more than your letter to the court that basically says, this is the person that I want to handle my things. And most wills that I see say everything to my spouse or everything to my kids if not my spouse. And what people don't understand is oftentimes family that is left here on the other side does not know what everything is. You know, if you think about it, I mean, how many of us can say that our spouse or our kids or anybody that's really important to us in our inner circle, that they know where our retirement accounts are, where our life insurance is, where our investments are, our bank accounts, people don't know that because we don't typically talk about it. So, but it does depend on each individual person and what their goals are and what they want for their family on the other side. So it's kind of hard to answer in this format, but I hope that adds some clarity.
What is the most form?
I was afraid you were going to ask me. I can't remember what the whole acronym is for, but it's double L. It's LLST
It's
is
medical orders for
medical
life-sustaining
orders for
treatment.
life-sustaining treatment. Thank you.
Okay.
And so it's basically, as Gina says, it's a more specific description of particular situations, nutritional support, intravenous feedings, that sort of thing. So it gets into more detail about what people would want. It's always modifiable. Nothing's cast in stone with these things. If your feelings change over time depending on your condition and so forth. And it's a way for the individual to give the people around them that roadmap. So long as they are coherent and conversational and understanding, it's irrelevant, because the patient always gets the opportunity to say yes or no, make all their own decisions. But it's, as things move along in a natural dying process, there's going to come a point where they may not be. And at that point, it provides clarity for the caregivers, both medical and family, and it provides backup to that person who's in that uncomfortable position. The only thing I'd add to what Gina said is choose your proxy wisely. You know, there's sort of a natural family expectation maybe sometimes of this person or that person. You need to be able to trust that you see eye to eye on how this ought to work with your proxy. You know, that doesn't always happen. You have a proxy who has
Favorite person might not be.
a different sense of how this should go than you do, and they may not make the decisions you want them to make, not because they're mean or evil, but because this is honestly how they feel, and lacking really specific instructions to the contrary, or sometimes even with them. They say, oh yeah, well that's if she's really bad, and she's not that bad yet. Okay. And so they go their way. So you need to pick your proxy carefully.
Can I ask a question about that? Is there something on the most form that dictates whether or not I want to be put under hospice or palliative care? Like, can I specify that?
I don't know that that question is specifically asked on the most form, but everything relevant to that, such as all those life-sustaining treatments, do you want, if you're not able to eat, do you want artificial nutrition, and in what forms? You can specifically say, I'll do this, not that. I'll do, if I have a short-term or an infection that seems treatable, yes, I'll accept IV antibiotics, but not, parenteral nutrition kind of thing. You can get into that level of detail. Some of those are specifically asked on there because they anticipate, those end-of-life questions coming up.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that. It's my understanding as well that that most form was recently revised and updated, and that it used to be maybe 1-2 pages. Now it's like 4 pages.
It's 4 pages.
So the other thing that I want to, so it's a lot more detailed than what it used to be, and it was very recently revised, I believe, like just in 2025 or the last 6 months. But anyway, I just wanted to add that point, because if there are people that are thinking, well, I have that done already, or they completed it in the past, it might be a good opportunity or something to think about, maybe making that appointment again and revisiting the issue, because it's a lot more detailed now than it was.
Okay, so can somebody spell that for me? Because I'm hearing, and I don't know what the audience is hearing, but I'm hearing most, M-O-S-T.
No, it's mole, L with an L, yeah. It's life.
Medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, so it's MOLST.
Okay, most.
Thank you.
It's hard to say.
Is it, is one L, it's not two, it's not limitations of life
I
sustaining?
don't think so.
Okay.
It's 1 L.
All right, it's 1 L, okay. Shows you what we know.
No,
We'll figure it out.
We just go,
You know
we
it's
just go
important
the
for
bright
There's
thing.
definitely at least one L in there,
Bright
though.
form.
I'll say another benefit that I've learned is part of the revision that they did, and I don't know that this is done yet, but I've heard that they're in the works of trying to create more of a central registrar for these forms. So then even if something happens, there's an emergency, and the family isn't there yet, or they can't find it, then the medical professionals will be able to access it.
Oh, I love that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that is better. Because right now, you're right, they'll tell you, stick it on your refrigerator.
Yeah.
Because if someone calls EMS and you didn't want them, or you have ideas about what you want them to do or not do,
Right.
that's actually what they're going to do, is they're going to look at your refrigerator, because that's what they're taught.
Well,
is that this is where we tell people
Who
to
wants
put
to
it.
look at it on the refrigerator
Yeah,
every day?
That's
Well-
why it's hot pink.
Yeah.
Well, it's the
Because
same
they
thing with
want
the
it to be
DNR.
obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
We always say, put it on bright yellow paper and stick it on your fridge, you have a DNR, so.
Suddenly my
It's the
fridge got
same
really depressing. I go there first, I'm like, oh god. Someday, somebody's gonna walk in here and see my bright paper.
This is supposed to be a place of joy. Just open the doors and see what there is to eat, and here I am with these forms. Yeah.
I'm not hungry anymore.
Yeah, right.
But as a past paramedic, I used to see them on the refrigerator or somewhere where you walked in. Some of them had 'em sometimes right in the hallway, front hallway, and a lot of the older generation didn't want to have it there because they didn't want people to know, because yes, they, did, or it's a family member, and the family member would automatically call 911. But having that form there as a medic, I can call medical control and say, hey, listen, they do have a DNR, we were called anyways, what do you want to say? Do they have the form? Yep. And they're like, okay, then just not do it. But that form it's very important to have those up on the refrigerator in front.
I can personally attest to the chaos that ensues when you don't have things. My dad was terminally ill, and back in the day, you didn't do all those things. Now, my mom was a nurse, and despite having that kind of knowledge, you panic. And she called 911, and the entire universe showed up at the house. She called us, and we came, and I'm at the bedroom door, because that's where my dad was. I was at the bedroom door, and I'm like, this is not it. This is not what we're doing. We need to, they're like, we can't do anything about it. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm calling his physician at 3 o'clock in the morning going, you need to get your ass on the phone and talk to and I literally said that to the poor man, and talk to these paramedics, because this is not how we want this to go. This is not how my dad wants this to go. So, I literally had to get the sheriff, who was standing at the door, because no one's allowed in the room, to go in the room and tell the paramedics in charge to pick up the phone and talk to the doctor. And then, so then they took their orders and did the whole thing. And then, my dad is at the house. Everybody leaves except for the sheriff's office. So, you're drinking coffee with the cops because they're waiting for everything else to come, because the coroner has to come to your house. And then, it's just clearly it's a nightmare, and it's truly not worth it. If you know what's going on, I know what's going on, and I don't have a terminal diagnosis, but I know exactly what I want and exactly what I don't want.
Worth reiterating that legally in the state, anywhere in the country, I believe, people like paramedics, medical personnel, they are legally obligated to resuscitate.
Yep. Yep.
Unless they have a specific order to the contrary. And, my husband knows what to do is not a great answer,
Right.
because he may not be there.
Correct.
So it's important to have it in writing, because that's what it's going to take to head off.
Absolutely. And to the contrary, then when my mother was ill, she lived with us, we had everything in writing, and I just picked up the phone and called the hospice nurse, and she said, nothing, I'll take care of everything. And she did. She came to the house, she did all the stuff, she's like, hang out as long as you want, but, and then I'll call the funeral home and do all the things. So, in contrast, it is so, so two different experiences, but I definitely would take the latter over the prior.
And just for you guys watching, the disembodied voice was our producer Nadine. So thanks for pitching in there, Nadine. Carrie, I know you like working with patients in the bedside, that kind of thing. Where do you see people struggling most emotionally as they approach the end of life, and how does the family support that person?
Well, I think it depends on the person, but I think a lot of people at the end of life have a hard time leaving their people behind. I think that seems to cause a lot of anxiety, and then also we don't know what's on the other side, and nobody can tell them. Nobody can say this is what's going to happen. So that's a lot. That's hard for them to come to terms with. Also, I guess I try and help support the family, because usually, a lot of times too, the family doesn't really, they're upset too, because they're kind of going through it with their loved one, so they don't know how to support them either. So that's where I come in and try and remind everybody, this is still your mom. This is still, even though she's dying, this is still her. So let's try, so I might try and incorporate different things to help them support their loved one through it. So one of the things I did was just a guided journal. That's one of the tools I've used that was helpful to try and help the person, like, kind of come to terms with as we're writing things about their life and all of the things that they've gone through. Like, I did live a good life. I did have, and my kids are going to be okay. So those kinds of things. But it's also, I've had very young people too. So there's a spectrum of, and sometimes I'm not the like, I don't know if that person ever gets clarity before they go on. But I like to think that they do. I like to think that there's some peace before they go on. So, yeah. I don't know.
A lot of it, I think, believes on the person and their belief systems, you know, and what they've had in place their entire lives, you know. Gina, what mistakes do families make legally when someone's dying or, like, just passed away? What should they not do?
Oh, boy. Should they not do when somebody's dying or just passed away? Oh, that's a tough one.
Is there something that pops into mind that, like my mind says, if someone's dying, don't try to make them make changes?
Yeah.
But beyond stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. I would say that is very important. And unfortunately, I see that a lot, and that creates a lot of conflict because then everybody is suspicious of the circumstances in which, why was this will changed? Why was this power of attorney changed? Why, you know, and that just can create a lot of extra and unnecessary litigation. So yes, you should not wait until somebody is in that position and then start changing documents, or what I see happen too is all of a sudden changing how you hold some of your property. And what I'm talking about here is rushing and adding children to bank accounts or to deeds on their house. Things like that, thinking that those are going to be ways to avoid the court process or making it easier for family members, when in fact it doesn't. And that can really just complicate things and result in a division that is not at all what the person was envisioning or intending for, and then of course just leave a lot of conflict. So never just trying to change things by putting kids on, changing title to documents, or just changing documents in general. So thanks for the prompt, but yes, those would be the things.
I had a client who literally said to me one day, well, we just had a big situation, and it was her grandmother who wasn't actually dying at that point, but had just gotten out of the hospital with a broken hip, so was still confused.
Yeah.
And she called her second son and said, come get me. John kidnapped me and he wants me to sign papers. And that was her oldest son. So, you know, that whole, I want you to switch something right now because I assume you're going to die soon, you know? So, it's interesting what families will do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gina, who's in charge of planning funeral arrangements?
Oh, you mean me?
I'm sorry, Julie's got it.
That's okay. So if you don't listen to anything else I have to say, and this is all you hear, this is the most important thing I tell anybody. The person in New York State legally in charge of doing your funeral arrangements is your legal next of kin, which might sound totally fine, but let's think through that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So in New York State, your legal next of kin is a list. It starts with your spouse. Doesn't matter if you've not seen your spouse in 30 years, doesn't matter if you don't live together, doesn't matter if you greatly dislike them, or if you're best friends, your spouse is legally in charge, even if you have a new girlfriend. If you are not married, if you are divorced, if you were never married, if you're widowed, it would be your children. So, and it would be your children equally. So if you have 4 children, and they all live scattered around the states, or if your 4 children don't get along, or maybe you're estranged with a couple of your children, they still are equally in charge of your funeral arrangements. If you don't have children, it just kind of keeps going down the line. It would be your parents. Even if your parents don't necessarily have the same religious practice you do, even if your parents don't necessarily abide by either how you live your life or what your gender identity is, if there is a disconnect there, they're still in charge. If your parents are no longer alive, you're not married, you don't have children, it would be your siblings. And then same thing, if you don't necessarily get along with your siblings for whatever reason, they're still in charge. And then it just kind of keeps going down from there. I find this to be an issue probably once a week. I work with families constantly, right? Like I work in the firm where I'm at, we work with about 800 families a year. So I see this just all the time because family dynamics are challenging, right? Like I know my family is perfect, but even with them, this was an issue. So I think that's something that people really need to address and acknowledge. So even if you're 18 years old and you're not planning on dying for forever, you don't even have to do your funeral arrangements. You don't have to plan anything ahead of time. You don't have to even accept the fact that you're going to die. But what you should do is know who's going to be in charge if that happens and whether or not you're okay with that. And if you're not okay with it, there is an agent form you can do very simply. It doesn't have to be notarized. It just has to be witnessed. So like we could do it sitting right here together. You just need your agent that you're appointing to sign it. You need to sign it. And then you need 2 people to see it. And then like every form, it should be someplace where people know where it is. So not locked away in a safety deposit box, not with your will with a lawyer hidden away where nobody knows where it is. The form should be with the agent, the form should be with you. It's a good idea to leave a form with the funeral home just so we have the original copy just in case. And then, have something easily accessible in your file box with all of your other stuff. So I think that piece above anything would lead to so much less heartache and challenges in an already stressful and challenging situation. And I am constantly the bad guy telling people, I'm so sorry your person died, but there's nothing I can do, I can't help you. And that's so defeating, and there literally is nothing I can do. If the person has already died, that's it. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing, to like save people some heartache when the time comes, because even if you're not around, your family and the people around you that love you are going to be devastated by you not making that decision ahead of time.
It's the same order medically, too.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to get, even if there's not difficult family dynamics, even if they're just normal family dynamics, it's hard to get 4 people to agree on anything.
For sure. Yeah.
So you have multiple siblings or multiple children, and you have to navigate consent and agreement on it's difficult.
Yeah, and maybe even if they all get along, maybe they haven't sat in the same room in 20 years, right? Like now you're making them sit in the same room. You've told them mom is dying or dead, and now they have to process all these emotions while also handling all of this legal stuff, which is brutal. And just, it's hard. It's hard to get people to decide on where to go to eat, let alone what to do with mom.
Yeah, it is. Gina, who do people go to fill out these forms? Can they fill all these forms that you guys have mentioned out online?
That's a really good question. Yes and no. Some of them can be found online. Some of them you can find online and pay a real super cheap legal, I'm putting air quotes in there because it's not necessarily legal, but a cheaper rate for kind of cheap legal documents. I've seen people using ChatGPT and just trying to then just get signatures and witnesses. So some documents, yes, are available, and there's cheaper ways of doing things, but I would really encourage anybody to not think about this in terms of just the legal documents, because again, there's so many different versions and so many ways to get these things, and the DIY way of doing it, or even the cheap legal way of doing it, does not necessarily give you real peace of mind, I think, that people are after when they engage in planning. I think when people engage in planning, it's usually because they want to protect themselves and make sure that if something happens to their spouse, that they're going to be okay, or that their children are going to be okay, and that they're taking that control while they're here, and they're going to make things as easy as possible for their loved ones. But cookie cutter documents, cheap legal documents, DIY documents, it doesn't always, and more often than not, does not accomplish that goal, and can lead to more complications and extra expense down the line. Mm-hmm. So if If somebody's coming to this in their life because they just kind of want to check a box and say, yeah, I got it done, then sure. You can look online and there are ways you can do that. But if you're coming to this point in life and you're looking at it from a deeper perspective of saying, I really want to know that my family's going to be able to grieve the loss of me, or if my husband dies, and I'm just saying that because I'm a woman, obviously, but that I'll be okay and I'll know what to do and how to take care of my family and I'll know where everything is. That kind of planning, and it's a plan, it's a strategy that goes far beyond just simple documents. And to be done right, the reason why I put legal in air quotes before is because that can't really be accomplished when you're talking to somebody on a computer or doing a self-read questionnaire that they tell you an attorney's going to review and maybe spend 15, 20 minutes looking at it, or 15, 20 minutes talking to you. It takes a lot more than that to come up with a real plan that's really going to provide you and then your family with that level of protection and peace of mind than just a 15, 20-minute questionnaire or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
How can families, Christine, create meaningful moments with those family members that are close to death?
So, are you asking me like anticipatory grief kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so anticipatory grief is when someone is nearing the end of life, and so you're beginning your grief process at that point, and really say the things you need to say. That's the first thing that I would tell anybody. Talk to whomever it is you need to talk to. Share those things. If your life has taken you away from your family, for example, and you want to have some reconciliation going on, then bring those people to you. Have a conversation with them, even if it's on the phone. Mm-hmm. And if that's not a thing, do you want to write a letter? Do you want to do a video? Do you want to do any of those things that can be shared with them? Every situation's different. Some people will say, I'm really missing the fact that my daughter Susie's no longer in my life, but that's Susie's choice, but I would like to leave her some kind of message. And, so that's important to bring those things. And vice versa. The same thing, whereas I, feel bad that my mom's not in my life, but I know she doesn't want to see me at this point in time, so I'm not going to go to her, but I will share this information with her. I will send her a message in some form or another. And that's the thing. It's also recognizing, as I said before, that this is a roller coaster, right? You might be sitting here talking to your loved one and say, this is okay, we're good, you can go, and all of those things, and then, you freak out the next minute, because that's what happens with grief. And that conversation is the biggest thing. Say the things you want to say, make sure that you've got your ducks in a row, if you will, and, work through those things. Let them understand. There's nothing, people don't want to say that they're okay with someone leaving. Mm-hmm. They don't want the person who's dying to think that it's okay. Go ahead. It's okay. It's another Tuesday, right? But you also want them to know that you're going to be okay. It's that reassurance for the person who's leaving this earthly plane, and it's understanding on the side of the person who's being left behind. People will joke. I joke with my husband all the time. I say, I die first, because I'm not dealing with all this baloney. And it's all the baloney. No offense, Gina. It's all the baloney. It's all that stuff, right? I'm not doing this. But you need to communicate and know that things are going to be okay in the end, and that gives the person who's leaving some solace, some okay to leave kind of thing. and then the person who's left behind can say, I did the best I could with what I had at the moment.
Can I add to that? I
Absolutely.
just want to share a story that I had that made me think of that. I had a client who had hospice coming, was end of life, and for days she had been like, incoherent. She had this moment of clarity where she woke up and she was able, all of her kids were at the bedside, I was there, they were able to say, it's okay, Mom, like, we're good, you're okay, it's okay to go. And like, it was a most beautiful moment. That is why I do this work, is to witness moments like that and witness.
Well, and that's
that.
something that people don't realize happens when someone is passing away. They have that rally. You're like, they're getting better. No, they're not.
Yeah.
That's not. And they need someone to delicately explain that to them. That this is what's happening with this individual. That this is what we call a death rally. And they're doing really good and stuff. So those are moments to capture and have those conversations. And just, I love you, and we're going to be okay. And, vaya con Dios, whatever it is you need to say, and just know that the next phase is going to be them drifting off into that, coma kind of state.
That is super important. I know that from a personal
We have a
standpoint.
question. Risk, I believe this is for you. What is the form called to supersede your next of kin to organize your obituary?
Okay, so the form that I was talking about to appoint your next of kin, or appoint to supersede your next of kin, is the appointment of agent for right to disposition. It's something that I'm happy to share, so you can get my contact information. I can link it actually in the Facebook. You can get it right from the Department of Health, the Bureau of Funeral Directing. You can get it from any funeral home. Sometimes lawyers have it. Sometimes lawyers don't know what I'm talking about. It just depends. It's a free form. You can get it directly from a funeral home. You don't have to pay to pre-plan or to go in to do an appointment. You can literally just go and pick it up, although I suggest having somebody just explain it to you so you do it right. I keep like 30 of them in my car just in case, like I'm at a bar randomly talking with strangers and I'm like, here, you should probably have 6 of these.
You did say the coolest funeral director.
I did. I warned you.
Yeah, so you can find them, and I'm happy to share that link. Yeah.
When someone chooses to pre-plan their own funeral, can that be superseded by a family member?
I just learned planning for my mom's funeral when I was in Washington that in Washington, whatever she writes is set in stone and I can't change that. But in New York State, if she were to do it here, she decided she wanted to be cremated and I didn't want her to be, which is the conversation we keep having, then I could change that because I'm my mom's legal next of kin. That being said, my siblings would have to agree with me, so there's that piece. So you should pre-plan. You should, in the same way that Gina was talking about for the will, you should write down everything that you want and have in mind. It is free to pre-plan and to meet with the funeral director. You should have that conversation, but it's not written in stone. So if there is any concern whatsoever, that agent form needs to get done. And then you can appoint anybody. You can appoint your neighbor, you can appoint somebody at this table, you can appoint a random friend that you just trust, who you know is going to follow that pre-arrangement to the T.
But even the agent isn't legally bound to follow the plan?
Correct. Yep. They
You better
can.
trust your agent.
You better trust your agent. Yeah. And most of the time they do, right? The only
Sure.
thing that I think fine gets in the way of that truly is money. So if you plan ahead of time and you plan this like bananas funeral where you have like people coming in from all over the world to perform and it's, thousands of dollars and your agent is like, no, I don't have that money, then like they might change that and do something a little different. But if you fund it ahead of time and your agent doesn't have to worry about that, then there's no reason for them to not follow it to a T.
In the medical profession, and I'll do this, I'll start with Bob and give it to all 3 of you. What does a good death look like?
I think it's going to, these are all very individual things. So everybody probably has a different concept of that. But I think the easy out is a good death is what the patient perceives to be that. For most, but not all, that would be at home with family, friends around them, and not with a bunch of medical interventions actively resisting at the time. Most of us in the abstract would probably pick that. And again, one of the places where this goes awry is that the medical folks don't start having that conversation in advance, because it is a process. As grief is a process, getting to that point is a process. It can be a very eerie, weird thing in my job where I can look at a set of facts and a chart, and I know that this is not curable disease, and that as long as this person remains in my care, I at some point am going to be officiating at this time. And that person may seem perfectly fine and be perfectly fine and have lots ahead of them yet when I walk in the room, but I know, as much as one can know medical certainty, that that is coming. And I think that's the point where that has to be said from the very beginning. Like, here's, this is what it is. Now let's work on how to kick that down the road as far as we can. But the patient has to hear that. I think we owe that to them and their families, so that we can try to avoid those unrealistic expectations of later on. And then as we get closer, you have to lay those very same options out. Like, this is how this can look. And the absence of planning is a plan, becomes a plan. Because things are going to get put in motion without your control by the illness if you don't have a plan to alter it. So if this is what you want, and that's the best answer to all of this, typically, in my job certainly, is a good hospice program. We're blessed in Western New York to have good hospice care, and that would be their answer, is a good death is whatever the patient says it is and what they want to do. And every circumstance is different, and sometimes it changes as the situation evolves. What you think of, this is how I want it to go, circumstances intervene, and being home may not be so possible. But if it can, and that's what the patient wants, there are ways to make that happen in a way that's incredibly family friendly. It makes it as least awful as it can be, because it's never great, obviously.
Yeah, I can agree with everything you said. I think a perfect death would be at home with all of your caregivers around you. I think if you are dying, you definitely should get hospice care involved if you have 6 months. So hospice comes involved if it's 6 months or less left. Yes, right? Yeah. So I think, yeah. So I think that should be your goal if you're dying, and stay at home. A lot of times I think families get nervous because, like, the hospice nurse isn't at your bedside 24/7 telling you what to do. They do have on-call people, and they have numbers that you can reach out to, but a lot of times in a panic, family don't know what to do, and will take the patient to the hospital. And now it's on us to have to put needles in and do all these things that are painful that the patient didn't want. So, yeah, I think at home with your family, with hospice involved, with the death doula, is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, a couple of things to tie on to what you Carrie jogged my thought. The 6 month thing, first of all, is a common misperception. It stems from some, like many of these rules, it stems from unscrupulous people who are abusing the payment system. But the requirement for hospice organizations is that a physician who is independent of their organization, so typically the patient's physician, has to certify that they have an illness which is expected to likely result in their passing over the next 6 months. It's not cast in stone. It doesn't mean the clock starts ticking and you have to wait until you're sure this is it. That's very contrary, actually, to good hospice care. The sooner you reach that fork in the road is the point at which you reach that fork in the road is the point at which good hospice intervention is appropriate, and it because you want to be ready for those things. And you want to have them planned in advance because you don't know when they're happening. I mean, I'll say that to patients all the time that, look, right now you don't need much, you're doing fine. But at some point in this, things are going to happen. And one of the rules of medicine is that those things never seem to happen on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. They happen at Thursday evening or Saturday afternoon when the conventional medical system is terrible at getting to you and getting things to you in a way that is consistent with what you want. And hospice is all about that. They don't have to do anything right now, but they're a plan. And failure to have a plan means those things get activated, because what else are you going to do if your family member becomes suddenly incapacitated on Saturday morning, as happened to my mother. And we were in program, and that would have been a complete fiasco. It was not, because they came out, they had been doing almost nothing before that. And then they were there in a half an hour and averted a total catastrophe for the family. So there's that. The other thing that is incumbent on the medical folks is backing out at the right time. That's particularly an oncology question, is what is the point at which it's time to stop and it's time to move into this conversation. And that, again, is a very patient-specific, situation-specific thing, but it's, each time there's a new decision to be made, that's got to be out there. My standard thing I say to people is the goal in this situation, if we're not curing this, the only point of me treating you is if I can extend your life with what I'm doing. So you're going to live longer with this disease than you would if I wasn't treating you. But that has to be at a quality of life that you deem to be acceptable. Not what your spouse deems or what your kids deem, but what you say is acceptable. Then that becomes worthwhile. If I'm buying you time that you think is acceptable time, then that's my job. If that's getting harder, which it inevitably does as cancer progresses, you reach a point where it's not worth it anymore. And that last treatment, that last thing, is in families can sense it sometimes, they certainly can sense it in the aftermath. That, why did we do that? Why did we keep going? And then that is what often leads to those lousy ends in hospitals with all this stuff going on, where the DNR is getting signed in an ICU and you're unplugging a ventilator. And this person should never have gotten within a mile of there. Hospital deaths are something I track in our practice, because sometimes it's inevitable. Things happen that nobody can anticipate. Complications that are unpredictable are going to happen. So there's a certain baseline of that that's unavoidable. But much of the time, that's a failure somewhere along the way. If that's how a patient of mine passes in a hospital, that's always a question. Is there something I should have done to prevent that? Because that shouldn't be where most of our folks are spending their last days.
Right. You're so awesome.
Awesome goes around this table.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I agree with all of the things that they said. I mean, clearly they've expounded on all that. But, when Bob is speaking of the person who's, newly diagnosed and knowing that they have to, I'm going to live with this, and how long am I going to live with that? That's a point where I'm willing to step in and say, you know what, we're going to, and it's a weird, what I do is a weird thing, because it's a life through death coaching. So I'm taking you from, you're sitting across from me at the table and we're having a conversation about how your life is going to go, but you know what the inevitable end is. So we're going to talk about how you're going to live your best life. How are you going to, what do we need to do? Do you have all your things in order? Okay, so you do, you don't. We're gonna send you off to see Gina. Right, get all your things in order. What else do you need to do? Do you need to plan any of that stuff? We're going to send you off to Marika, whoever you choose. Clearly, I'm just speaking of, And do you have support? What's your support system look like? What's that going to look like? Well, maybe we need to bring Carrie in, and so that when that time comes, her, she's here. She'll come and sit with you at the bedside, or all of those things. Help you plan a vigil, whatever it is that you need to do for that end. But now that all that stuff's in order, How are we going to live the best possible life that you can live right now until that inevitable end? And that statement goes for anybody, whether you have a terminal diagnosis or not, but how are you going to live that best possible life all the way through? And we're going to walk you through all of those things. And we're going to walk you through your anticipatory grief. And we're going to walk you through, making sure that you have the kind of ending that you want. But I wholeheartedly agree that the best possible place someone could be is in their home. Or maybe it's not their home, maybe it's someone else's home, but it's a place where you're comfortable. It's a place where you feel at peace. It's a place where you can feel the love that exists for you. And, you can take your final breath in knowing that all of those things are the way they are.
There's such a fear of the unknown and such a fear of dying. And like I said earlier, we went and did some pre-planning for my mom when I was out visiting her in Washington. And we went to lunch with a couple of her friends in between appointments. And one of her friend goes, well, Karen's never going to die. That would be impressive, right? Trust me, more than anyone, I don't want my mom to die. But do you know what's going to happen? My mom's going to die. And having this conversation over lunch, I know was super uncomfy, and I actually apologized. I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happens. I walk into a room, and this is now the conversation that we're having. I didn't mean to do this. I was just enjoying my food. But
it normalizes it too.
It does, and it's so important. And my response, because obviously I use a lot of humor in how I communicate about this, but my response was, well, it happens to the best of us. Right? All of us, whether we like this or not, are not making it out of this alive. We are all terminal, whether it happens today or tomorrow or in 100 years from now. And being able to even just sit with that a little bit once in a while is so much more, so important, because you're able to have these conversations and you're able to sort of eliminate a bit of that fear. And my mom does not seem to have a fear of death. She was very comfortable in the funeral home and talking to the funeral director because she's had it forced upon her for 20 years. And I think that has given her some comfort in that, right? And I feel very comfortable in the fact that at some point I'm not going to be here and it's going to be okay. Humans are resilient. We survive so much. We get through grief. There are ways of doing it, and finding support and getting what you need to survive that. But having these conversations is so important, and kudos to anybody that is listening, because you've already made that first step. But if you want to have a good death, if you want to have a good life, I think acknowledging the fact that we don't get out of life is so important. To exactly what you just said. You got to talk about it.
You do. I had a patient the last time we were having the panel. We did the live panel, and I said, why don't you come? Here's a panel. She goes, oh no, I couldn't possibly talk about this. I said, because I'm afraid that I'll die sooner. If I talk about it, I'm like, yeah, exactly. Are you going to will it into existence? And of course, me being me said, that isn't how it works. And the invisible tattoo on the bottom of your foot with a date isn't going to change, whether you discuss it or not. But
that's a solid ability to manifest, though. If I could talk about the lottery and suddenly be like, money everywhere, that'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, that'd be a fabulous skill, but none of us have that ability.
Yeah.
So, it's going to happen. But
And I think
fear's a scary, it's a big thing. It's a big thing, and that's probably the worst of it, I think, is the fear that goes along with, I have, I kind of know I'm going to die, but this is kind of telling me that I really do have a date, and it's really going to happen, so it becomes fear, and how do you deal with fear?
I was just going to add that, any trial lawyer, or I imagine even somebody who's writing screenplays or movies and producing, anything like that, they'll tell you that the way that they're trained, the way they do, is to start from the end. When I was a trial lawyer, that's the way I was trained, so I did. I start from the end. What am I trying to protect my client from or convince the jury of, and then I work backwards. And it's the same thing here. There's a certain level of deniability. We don't want to face the reality that we're all dying, but we are. As we sit here right now, we're one breath closer, and we don't know when that time's going to be. And it's not something that we can say, well, it just happens to us when we're old or when we're sick. I was just spending some time in Florida with my dad, who's elderly, and they kept saying this over and over again, and I just had to keep on reminding them that that's just not the way it goes in life. We like to think we have this control, or that we know when this day is going to happen, but none of us do, and it is guaranteed. And I think that that's the other benefit of it, and I loved how you said that, Christine, about your coaching. Yes, it's deaf coaching, but it's through life and life. I'm botching your words, but
okay. Got it.
it's the same thing, because when you do take that time to sit down, you think about the end, right? Like, just like I said, a trial lawyer, a movie producer, what is it going to look like? What do you want your family to go through? What do you want for them to experience? Because this is your only opportunity now, while you're here, while you're alive, to think about those things and leave this legacy of love. For me, I really believe this, and especially as a widow, I believe this, and it's the best thing that you can do for your family, for yourself, is to just take that time, as scary as it is, as much as we don't want to think about it, but think about it, take that time, go through it, see it in your mind, so that you can put together a plan that is going to align with your intentions of what you would want your family to experience, or for you to experience if you lose your partner. So it really does become a way to start to live more intentionally, once you look at this. And I would also say planning should never be something that people do once, one and done kind of thing. I did it, check the box, and don't think about it again. No, because life changes, family dynamics change, the law changes. So I think it should be something that people review at least every 3 years. And that's the other added benefit, is that when you do this, it kind of helps you to focus a little more on the reality of just how precious our time here is. And once you do that, I think that's the added benefit, is you start to live a little more intentionally with your decisions.
Yeah, there's some version of that with every as we get to that hospice point, where I'll say we're at a point where we're not going to stop what's coming, but you don't have any control over that. I don't have control over that. What you can control is how you get there, and you can have some say about that stuff.
When I was in college in mortuary school, we had to write an obituary for ourselves. We had to write one if we died tomorrow, and we have to write one for when we died whenever. And as a college student, right, you're like, well, I'm going to live forever, so this is fine. I'm going to write it for, when I'm 132 years old, and here's all of these things I've accomplished, and I'm going to do so many things. I'm going to write a book, I'm going to travel. And that was really exciting, because I got to dream really big, right? Like, if I have 100 years, what would I do with all of this stuff? And then I had to write an obituary for if I died tomorrow, which sucked, right? Like, as a kid in college who had experienced very few years on this planet, it was really emotional for me, and it was supposed to be, because I was sitting there going, oh my God, what if I die tomorrow? Like, holy crap, that could happen, right? And like, all right, well, here's this comparison between all these things I'm going to do when I die at 130, and here's what's going to happen when I die at 20. I have a lot of things I want to accomplish. So it was a very, important moment, I think, not just for me, but for all of the students in the class, to really sit down with the potential of who we could be and who we may not be if we don't make it that far. And I think really everybody should do that. And it doesn't matter, again, how old you are. I was in college, I was just doing it for a grade, but you can do it for yourself too, in your own journal, in your own perspective. What do you want your life to look like? What do you need to plan? What do you need to think about? And what happens if you die tomorrow? Like, who decides things? Where does stuff go? What's going to happen? And how lost are all the people that love you? Or how lost are they going to be? So I think that's, if you need homework, do that, and in a needed form.
True. Well, we had to do.
I was going to say
we
that
had to do it too. When you do the doula
training.
training, they're like, write your obituary.
Did you find it?
We did a meditation.
Yeah, and
it
then
was
you had to write what
you got, so it was like putting yourself in the shoes of having like a terminal diagnosis. Where would you go? Who would you tell? What would you do? Those kinds of things. So
yeah,
it's very emotional.
Yeah. What's it? Yeah, it's a thing. Who do you tell first? You tell anybody?
I'm putting it on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
Bye, everybody. They'll be more appropriate.
Clearly, there's nothing better than social media affirmation in your life, right? Than putting it out there. But yeah, it's a thing. And I did it. I had a class. I've taken several classes, death and dying kinds of classes, and you show up and you're like, okay, what are we gonna do? You're gonna write an obituary, and you're gonna talk about what happens when your life is, when your life is over, and what do you say to the people that you leave behind, and where do you go, and in that one particular class, the death and dying class, we did go to a funeral home.
Oh, yeah.
And the man who was teaching the class did reconstruction work. Absolutely fascinating, but I digress. But if you want to add that to your cool, to see that and to experience everything that really goes into it, because people think you just kind of show up. They're not just going to kind of show up magically at the funeral parlor in a lovely satin-lined casket with flowers all over the place, and so.
I am in fact a magician. It's just like
I know.
Yeah.
I told them.
So, just to kind of wrap it all up today for everybody, one closing statement from each of you. What do you want people to know? What do you want to tell them? What drives you in this? Or what do they need to know? Whatever you want to tell them.
I guess I would just sort of repeat what I just said. Our time here is precious with every breath that we have. And I think the best thing that all of us can do for ourselves and for our family is to, meet with an experienced attorney and talk about these things. Not a 15, 20-minute cookie cutter type experience, but, talk about these things and get clear on what's important to you and what you want your family to experience. And it's the best way that you can leave your legacy in a way that's going to be remembered with love.
And updated.
And that's what I think, proper planning, that's what that is for me. And that's why I call it life and legacy planning, because when it's done right, it helps you to live your life more focused, more intentionally, and it helps you to be remembered in the eyes and the hearts of the people that you love and leave behind in a more positive way. And it helps you to feel good about it because you've taken the time to make those decisions. So that's what I'd say. Thanks.
Medically, the thing I would say to folks is, in any medical decision, in any treatment decision, understand what your options are, understand and have a plan for what your desired outcome is. And understand what are the chances I'm going to get there, and what's plan B if I'm not. Because that's where this begins to fall apart, is when the assumption is, I have cancer, I have to treat it, I have to do this. This is how you do it. What's next? And no sense of, well, how likely is this to work? What does work look like? One of the things the late great Bob Milch taught me is you've got to ask yourself, what does success look like? Because sometimes what a doctor counts as success is not exactly what a patient or their family thinks is success. So I think it's important for people to get that in their minds, is what am I hoping for out of this? And what is my plan B if I don't get there? And how likely am I to get there? Because that feeds into the answer to the other two questions.
I'll just add on to what Marika said, it's all going to happen to all of us, so let's start having these conversations more and make it more normalized, and it doesn't have to be scary, and you don't have to do it alone.
Mine would be a suggestion of ceremony. I think there is this perspective that if you just burn me up and throw me in the backyard, that's going to be easier for my family and my loved ones. And while that, I think, oftentimes is said with love, because we don't want the burden of the finances of a funeral or the burden of I don't want them to feel sad. So if they just burn me up and throw me in the yard, they don't have to have a funeral, they don't have to feel sad, they don't have to be in a scary situation, they don't have to pay money for things. And I don't think that's helpful. I think that ceremony, let me clarify. I know that ceremony is deeply important to humanity. We have been having ceremony around death since humans were Neanderthals. They have found loving burials with tools, with food, with art, along dead bodies since humans have existed. and not just humans, dolphins, ants, elephants, crows, all have funeral ceremonies. And that ceremony doesn't have to look like anything specific. It doesn't have to be that traditional, 7 to 9 calling hours with a Catholic service and then a burial. That ceremony can be getting together with all of the grieving folks and volunteering for a day at an organization that the deceased person loved. It can be going out, going dancing. It can be something, anything that resonates and gives a platform to the beginning of that grief process. And I think that's so, so important. But you have to have that conversation ahead of time in order to kind of create that ceremony. And that conversation needs to be had with your family. Are they really going to be better off just burning you up and throwing you in the yard? Probably not. But maybe, and you'll never know unless you have that conversation. So ceremony can be whatever you want it to look like. It's not a sales pitch for me. I don't care if I make money on ceremony. I care that people do ceremony to honor all of the years that somebody has lived through and all of the stories that they've created. And I just think that's important. And if you don't share your story, if you don't talk with your family, then that last honor and that last support system for them, it never takes place.
Your life is your legacy. People talk about legacy in the sense, well, I don't have a legacy. I don't have $7 million to build this place, or I can't do a wing on a hospital, or I can't do this, that, or the other. Your life is your legacy. Your legacy for your family is things like people being able to say to your children, I knew your mother when. Your mother did this wonderful thing for me. Your father did this wonderful thing for me. They helped me in ways they don't even know. That's a legacy. So whether you have a terminal illness or you don't have a terminal illness, that life through death coaching kind of thing is really an opportunity for you to get clear. It's that chance for you to get clear on what does my life mean? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to other people? And then once I'm clear on that, then I can peacefully and happily, if you will, transition to the next, to whatever it is that's next.
And from my perspective, I think what everybody needs to remember is you can have people in your life that have diametric opposites of what they believe. I think I was 5 when the first time my mother said to me, if you have a funeral for me, I'm going to come back and haunt you. Seriously. And I heard it my entire life. My father would never speak about it. Just before he died, my mother went 8 months sooner. And I said, Dad, what do you want? Because he would never talk about it. He looked at me and he said, a little bit more than we did for your mother. Okay.
So they could be anything because she wanted nothing. So
yeah. And we did, and we blended the two. And we had people come to my dad's wake that was a couple of hours, very nicely done. But, they came and they said, we never knew your mother died.
Yeah.
And then we got stories of mom and dad. So, there's that blending, right? There's no right and wrong. It's whatever that person really wants. That also honors their loved ones. So, thank you all for joining us today. I'm sure everybody, including myself, got a whole lot out of this. If you guys have any questions, please send them forward. We will make sure they get answered. Everybody's information will be at the end of the podcast. And from Christine and I, from everybody here today, go and live a good life. It's going to be 65 degrees out there in March. Go and live a good day.
Live your legacy.
Yep.